They weren't just murders. They were puzzles wrapped in fear, sealed with silence. From mysterious letters that forced a family from their dream home, to a young woman murdered in a church under ritualistic horror, these are the stories they don't want you to remember. No arrests. No answers. Just the chilling feeling that something is still watching, and waiting. These are 5 of the most disturbing true crime stories you were never supposed to hear. The vanishing of Lauren Spirer. The early morning hours of June 3, 2011, in Bloomington, Indiana, were supposed to be quiet and uneventful. But that night, something sinister unfolded. Lauren Spirer, a 20-year-old student at Indiana University, stepped into the dark streets of the college town, and never returned. Her disappearance would grip the nation, raise uncomfortable questions about the people she trusted, and remain one of the most mysterious unsolved cases in recent memory. Lauren was known for her bubbly personality, a petite blonde who made friends easily and radiated warmth. That summer night began like many others, a social gathering, drinks with friends, and college parties. Lauren left her apartment at Smallwood Plaza around 12:30 a.m., heading to Kilroy's sports bar. She left her phone and shoes at the bar, suggesting she never intended to go far. From there, things get murky. Security footage showed Lauren exiting the bar barefoot. She returned briefly to her apartment complex with a friend, but then continued the night at 2 more off-campus apartments. Between 2:30 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., Lauren moved between locations with several male acquaintances. These individuals would become the last known people to see her. At 4:30 a.m., surveillance captured her walking south on 11th Street, wearing only a white shirt and black leggings. The street was dimly lit. No one has seen her since. The police investigation launched immediately, but rather than bringing clarity, it only deepened the mystery. Lauren's friends and the men she spent the night with were interviewed. All claimed to be cooperative, yet some refused polygraphs and quickly retained legal counsel. Public suspicion mounted. Why were those closest to her so defensive, so early? One of the men, Jesse Wolfe, Lauren's boyfriend, was reportedly asleep at home. Another, Corey Rossman, claimed he had been punched in the face during the night and had no memory of what happened afterward. Investigators scoured Bloomington. Volunteers combed wooded areas, lakes, and fields. Lauren's parents, Charlene and Robert Spirer, moved to Indiana temporarily to assist with the search. They distributed flyers, held vigils, and spoke to the press. Their desperation turned to anger as weeks went by without meaningful leads. The Spirers became increasingly vocal in their belief that someone in Lauren's circle knew more than they were admitting. They pointed fingers subtly at the young men who were with her, emphasizing that while no one had been arrested, cooperation was lacking. Charlene Spirer once remarked, "We're not interested in ruining someone's life. We're interested in finding our daughter." Tips flowed in from across the country. Psychics offered insights, amateur detectives sent theories. Some believed Lauren had overdosed and that her friends, fearing repercussions, had disposed of her body. Others speculated she had been abducted by a stranger. But no physical evidence supported either theory. In 2016, a man named Daniel Messel was convicted in a separate case, the 2015 murder of Indiana University student Hannah Wilson. The similarities sparked interest. Both were young, blonde students who vanished after a night out. Investigators examined Messel's possible involvement in Lauren's case, but nothing conclusive ever emerged. The link faded. The absence of a crime scene, a body, or even a confirmed sighting after 4:30 a.m. remains the biggest obstacle. There was no sign of struggle, no clear motive, and no forensic trail to follow. Bloomington police stated they believe foul play was involved, but they have not named any suspects publicly. In 2021, the FBI and local law enforcement revisited evidence with new forensic technology. Still, no breakthroughs were announced. The case is cold, but never closed. Lauren's photo still appears on missing persons databases, and her name surfaces in discussions about campus safety and justice reform. For many, the Lauren Spirer case is a chilling reminder of how someone can simply vanish. For her parents, it's a daily torment. In public statements, they often refer to Lauren in the present tense, holding on to hope, no matter how faint. There is something particularly haunting about the silence that surrounds this case. The quiet from those last with her, the silence of the streets she disappeared into, and the void left in a family's life. Questions persist. Did someone cover up a tragic accident? Was she targeted by a predator that night? Or is there someone walking free who carries the truth in secret? In the end, Lauren Spirer's story is a puzzle with too many missing pieces. But even a decade later, her name still echoes in the corridors of Indiana University and in the hearts of those who believe that someday, the truth will be found. The Icebox Murders. On Father's Day, June 23, 1965, Houston police received a concerned call from the family of Fred and Edwina Rogers, an elderly couple who lived in a modest home on Driscoll Street in the Montrose neighborhood. The couple hadn't been seen in days, and their phone had gone unanswered. Officers arrived at the house just after sunset, expecting perhaps a medical emergency, or nothing at all. What they discovered instead became one of the most gruesome and baffling murder mysteries in Texas history. The house was eerily quiet and meticulously clean. Everything appeared in its place, with no signs of forced entry. There was no immediate sign of the couple. Officers began a routine search of the premises. In the kitchen, one officer opened the refrigerator and froze. Inside were shelves of neatly stacked meat, wrapped carefully in butcher paper. At first, he thought someone had stored a large quantity of pork. But as he looked closer, the truth became horrifyingly clear. These were human body parts. In the vegetable drawer lay the decapitated heads of Fred and Edwina Rogers, their eyes gouged out, skulls crushed. The rest of the couple's dismembered remains were found hidden in the fridge and freezer. Their internal organs had been flushed down the toilet, and blood had been carefully scrubbed from the home. It was a slaughterhouse, but with no mess. The only person unaccounted for was the couple's 43-year-old reclusive son, Charles Rogers. He lived in a private room in the attic, accessible by a hidden staircase. His room was Spartan and unervingly clean. No sign of a struggle. No sign of Charles. A bloodied saw was discovered in the house, but no fingerprints could be recovered. The car was missing. Charles had vanished. Neighbors described Charles as a strange, quiet man, almost invisible in the neighborhood. He communicated with his parents by slipping notes under their door. He was a former Navy pilot, a skilled ham radio operator, and an accomplished seismologist. Highly intelligent, but socially detached. He had once worked for Shell Oil, but had left years before under mysterious circumstances. With Charles missing and the only plausible suspect, police issued a nationwide manhunt. His car was found abandoned in the parking lot of a Houston hotel. From there, the trail went cold. Rumors swirled. Some believed Charles had taken his own life. Others thought he fled to Mexico, or perhaps even South America. But no confirmed sighting ever surfaced. The murders were methodical and required anatomical knowledge. The precision with which the bodies had been dismembered and drained suggested a scientific mind. Investigators believed the crime had occurred on June 20th, 3 days before the discovery. Charles had ample time to clean, pack, and disappear. The deeper investigators dug, the darker the Rogers family dynamic appeared. Friends said the relationship between Charles and his parents was strained, especially with his domineering mother, Edwina. There were whispers of psychological abuse. Charles reportedly believed his parents were stealing money from his bank account, and some speculated he'd been planning his escape for years. But the mystery deepened in 1992, when authors Hugh and Martha Gardenia published The Man on the Grassy Knoll, a controversial book that linked Charles Rogers to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. According to their theory, Charles had CIA ties from his military background and had been recruited into a plot to kill Kennedy. The authors claimed he had flown to Dallas with Lee Harvey Oswald, and that, after the assassination, he returned to Houston, mentally unstable and paranoid. They alleged the murder of his parents was part of his plan to sever all personal ties and flee the country. While mainstream historians dismissed the theory as conspiracy-laced fiction, some elements intrigued amateur sleuths. Charles was fluent in multiple languages and skilled in survival tactics. If anyone could disappear permanently, they argued, it was him. The case remains officially open, but inactive. No charges were ever filed. No remains were ever recovered. Over the decades, Charles Rogers became a ghost, a name attached to one of the most violent unsolved crimes in Texas history. His parents were laid to rest quietly, their deaths a cautionary tale of what can happen behind closed doors, even in the safest-seeming suburban homes. Today, the house on Driscoll Street no longer exists. It was demolished years ago, replaced by a new structure. The neighborhood has changed, gentrified and quiet. But locals still speak of the icebox murders in hushed tones, of a son who vanished without a trace, and a crime so perfectly executed that it almost defied human comprehension. What drove Charles Rogers to murder his parents? Was it years of emotional repression? A mental breakdown? Or was he erasing his past for reasons tied to something larger, something buried deeper in the corridors of Cold War espionage? The icebox murders remain frozen in time, unsolved, unanswered, unforgettable. The Yuba County Five. On the night of February 24, 1978, 5 young men from Yuba City, California, packed into a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego and drove 90 miles north to Chico State University to attend a basketball game. It was supposed to be a fun evening. The group, Bill Sterling, 29, Jack Hewitt, 24, Ted Weiher, 32, Jack Madruga, 30, and Gary Mathias, 25, were all mentally or developmentally disabled to varying degrees. They were close friends and shared a love for sports. They had a big day planned the next morning, participating in a special Olympic-style basketball tournament. But they never returned home. The next day, their families were immediately alarmed. These weren't men prone to impulsive behavior or reckless detours. They were responsible within the boundaries of their abilities, and they had been looking forward to the tournament for weeks. When they didn't show up, parents and police began searching. Days later, the Montego was discovered in the Plumas National Forest, far off course from their original route, 70 miles from Chico, in the opposite direction of Yuba City. The car was abandoned on a remote, winding dirt road at 4,400 feet elevation. Snow surrounded the vehicle, but it wasn't stuck. There was enough gas in the tank. The keys were gone, but the battery still worked. Strangely, it appeared the car had been deliberately stopped, not crashed or broken down. Inside were empty snack wrappers and maps, but no signs of struggle. The location was baffling. Why had 5 men driven into the frigid mountains late at night, with no preparation for cold weather or rugged terrain? Months passed with no word, no sightings, no answers. Then in June, when the snow melted, a Forest Service employee made a gruesome discovery. A trailer, roughly 20 miles from the abandoned car, had been broken into. Inside, on a bed covered with 8 sheets, lay the emaciated body of Ted Weiher. His beard growth and the amount of food consumed from the trailer suggested he had survived for weeks, possibly 2 months, after the car was abandoned. That revelation only deepened the mystery. The trailer had a propane tank that had never been turned on. It contained food, clothing, blankets, yet Ted had frozen to death. His feet were frostbitten. He'd lost between 80 and 100 pounds. Next to him were personal belongings, including a gold ring inscribed with his name. Later, the remains of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga were found 11 miles back toward the car, their bodies scattered in the woods. Jack Hewitt's backbone was discovered further off the road, identifiable only by dental records. Of the 5 men, only Gary Mathias, an Army veteran diagnosed with schizophrenia, was never found. Theories flooded in. One theory suggests the group got lost. Perhaps they took a wrong turn or tried to follow Gary's vague memory of a cabin in the mountains. But the road they took was far from any logical route. Their families insisted none of them would have voluntarily left the warmth of the car and walked into the wilderness, especially Ted, who hated the cold, and Jack Madruga, who was fiercely protective of his car. Another theory centered on Gary Mathias. He was the most high-functioning of the group, and the only one with military experience. Some speculated he led the others into the mountains. Perhaps he had a psychotic episode. His own shoes were found in the trailer next to Ted's body, suggesting he may have swapped footwear to escape into the snow, but no trace of him was ever discovered. Others proposed a more sinister explanation, that the group encountered someone, or something, in those woods. A confrontation. A chase. A fear that drove them to abandon safety. But no evidence of foul play was ever found. There were chilling details. Forest workers recalled seeing the car parked along the snow-covered road the night after the men vanished. They assumed the car would be gone by morning. It wasn't. In fact, it remained untouched for days, meaning the men had already entered the woods by then. There was also a strange report from a man named Joseph Shones. He claimed that on the night of the disappearance, while stuck in the snow nearby, he saw flashlights and heard what he thought were voices and a woman screaming. He tried to call out, but received no response. Police could not confirm the account, but the timeline aligned. Then came the most bizarre element, the Forest Service trailer. It was stocked with supplies. Had the men known to turn on the gas, they might have survived the winter. Was it fear, confusion, or lack of understanding that kept them from using what was available? Or did someone else lead them there, someone who didn't want them to survive? Despite extensive search efforts, no further remains were found. Gary Mathias became a ghost. With no body, no footprints, and no definitive sightings, his fate remains unknown. The Yuba County 5 case remains one of the most confounding in American criminal history. It has been dubbed America's Dyatlov Pass for its eerie parallels: young people in a remote area, sudden irrational behavior, unexplained deaths, and a lingering sense that something is missing from the story. More than 4 decades later, the families of the 5 men still grieve, not just the loss, but the lack of closure. The remote woods of Plumas National Forest continue to hold their secrets, untouched and unyielding, as if nature itself conspired to swallow the truth. The Watcher of Westfield. In June 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus thought they had found their forever home, a beautiful 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard in the quiet suburb of Westfield, New Jersey. Just 45 minutes from Manhattan, the home represented the culmination of the American dream: a safe neighborhood, a tight-knit community, and a picture-perfect place to raise their 3 children. But within days of closing the sale, their dream twisted into a surreal nightmare. 3 days after purchasing the house, Derek went by alone to start renovations. As he checked the mailbox, he noticed an envelope addressed simply to the new owner. Inside was a typed letter written with an unnerving tone of familiarity and menace. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. I asked the woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened." The letter went on to mention specific details about the house and the Broaddus family that could only be known by someone who had been watching them closely. The writer referenced their 3 children, by birth order, and even commented on the contractors Derek had hired. "I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Stop it." Shaken, Derek returned home and showed the letter to Maria. The couple contacted the police immediately. An officer read the letter and was disturbed by the level of detail. They reached out to the previous owners, John and Andrea Woods, who said they had received a similar letter shortly before moving out, but it had seemed odd rather than threatening. More letters followed. They addressed the Broadduses by name. They mentioned the children by nicknames only the family used in private. One letter read, "It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found out what's in the walls yet?" The writer claimed they were one in a long line of watchers who had watched the home for generations. Despite installing security systems and cameras, the Broadduses found no leads. Police interviewed neighbors and investigated the handwriting, fingerprints, and even DNA. None matched anyone in the area. The letters had been postmarked from nearby towns, but there were no surveillance cameras at the mailboxes. The Broadduses became prisoners of paranoia. They stopped taking their children to the house, never fully moved in, and considered selling the home. But with the story beginning to leak and the threat of the Watcher hanging over the property, finding a buyer proved difficult. Then came the public exposure. In 2015, New York magazine's The The Cut, published an article revealing the story to the world. It quickly went viral, with readers drawn to the modern-day Gothic horror of it all, a seemingly ordinary house in a peaceful town harboring a malevolent, unseen presence. Speculation erupted. Some neighbors were suspected, even interrogated. One elderly man was caught on a security camera snooping around the house. Another neighbor's adult children were known to be eccentric and had written strange fiction. But there was no definitive evidence. Police were baffled. The community began to turn against the Broadduses, some accusing them of fabricating the story to get out of a bad real estate deal. Desperate, the Broadduses rented the house to tenants, who later received a letter, too. This one mentioned the renters by name and included a chilling message: "You are despised by the house, and the watcher won't stop watching." Theories swirled. Some believed the watcher was a disgruntled bidder who had lost the house during the purchase. Others thought it might be someone mentally ill, obsessed with the home. A few suggested it was an elaborate hoax, possibly even orchestrated by the Broadduses themselves. But they passed lie detector tests, cooperated with all investigations, and continued paying the mortgage for a house they were too afraid to live in. In 2018, they finally sold the house at a significant loss. The new owners received no letters, at least none they disclosed. No one has been arrested. No suspects have ever been charged. The identity of the watcher remains unknown. The watcher case tapped into something deeply unsettling: the violation of privacy in the most sacred of spaces, home. The idea that someone is watching, lurking, knowing your children's names and watching them from the shadows, haunts even the most skeptical minds. 657 Boulevard still stands, pristine and lovely from the outside. But for those who know its story, it will never be just a house. It will always be the place where young blood was sought, where threats arrived in the mail, and where a family's American dream was quietly and expertly destroyed by an unseen hand. The silent death of Arliss Perry. On the night of October 12, 1974, 19-year-old Arliss Perry, a newlywed and devout Christian from Bismarck, North Dakota, had an argument with her husband, Bruce, a Stanford University sophomore. They were living on the university campus in married student housing. To cool off after their disagreement, Arliss told Bruce she was going to the Stanford Memorial Church to pray. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when she walked out into the crisp California night, heading toward the grand Romanesque structure at the heart of campus. Bruce waited for her, expecting her to return shortly. But she never did. By early morning, her body was discovered inside the church by a security guard named Stephen Crawford. Arliss was found near the altar, lying on her back with her hands folded across her chest. She had been strangled, her head cruelly bashed with an ice pick, which was still embedded in her skull. She had also been sexually assaulted with a church altar candle, one of the larger ones used in formal ceremonies. The scene was staged, ritualistic. One candle had been placed between her breasts, another between her legs. Her jeans had been removed and arranged neatly beside her. Her blouse had been torn open, and her body was partially exposed but carefully positioned. It appeared the killer had lingered, arranging her like a macabre offering. Stanford campus police and local authorities immediately began the investigation. The doors of the church had been locked from the inside. The only person known to have keys and access after hours was Stephen Crawford, the same guard who had discovered the body. But at the time, he was not considered a strong suspect. Instead, suspicion focused briefly on Bruce Perry, who had reported Arliss missing just after 3 a.m., and then on a range of unknown individuals possibly involved in occult rituals. The satanic panic was just beginning to rise in America, and the horrifying scene inside the church seemed to invite that kind of speculation. The manner in which Arliss's body had been arranged, reminiscent of ritual symbolism, led to theories involving cults or ritualistic killings. Adding to the mystery, the church itself was a place steeped in symbolism, angelic murals, grand architecture, and heavy religious overtones. Some wondered if the killer had chosen it specifically, or if it was simply a matter of opportunity. Arliss, a devout Christian, had moved to California just weeks before the murder to be with her husband. She was reportedly naive and conservative, with little knowledge of California's counterculture. Her friends described her as trusting, kind, and reserved. She had no known enemies. Years passed with no arrests. Leads went cold. Suspects were questioned and cleared. The case eventually slipped from the headlines, though it lingered in the minds of amateur sleuths and true crime obsessives. Over the decades, books and websites speculated wildly, some tying the case to Charles Manson, others to serial killers like Ted Bundy, or even the son of Sam cult theory that linked multiple murderers through supposed satanic networks. But all of it was conjecture. Then, in 2018, 44 years after the murder, there was a breakthrough. DNA technology had advanced significantly, and the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office decided to retest evidence from the scene. A sample taken from Arliss's clothing was matched to none other than Stephen Crawford, the security guard who had discovered the body that morning. When police arrived at his apartment with a search warrant in June 2018, Crawford, now 72, shot himself in the head before he could be taken into custody. In an instant, the answer to one of the most haunting unsolved cases in California history was simultaneously revealed and denied its full justice. It is believed that Crawford, who had served as a campus police officer before being demoted to security guard, had access, opportunity, and perhaps motive. But no diary, confession, or known explanation was ever found. The reasons why he chose Arliss, or why he staged the scene so grotesquely, remain unknown. Was it a spontaneous act of violence, or something deeply premeditated? Had Crawford been lurking in the church, waiting for a victim? Did he know Arliss personally, or was it random chance that brought her to him that night? Theories persist. Some believe Crawford may have had a history of violent thoughts or suppressed aggression. Others still think the murder had symbolic intent, even if only in his mind. The way the candles were used, the positioning of the body, it all hinted at a level of intentionality far beyond an act of passion. Though the case was officially closed after the DNA match, the questions surrounding Arliss Perry's death continue to stir unease. In life, she was a quiet, hopeful young woman starting a new chapter. In death, she became a symbol of unanswered horror, a light extinguished in the very place where she sought peace. The Stanford Memorial Church still stands, its pews filled on Sundays, its grandeur attracting thousands. But for those who know the story, the building holds a darker history, a silent shadow behind the stained glass.